Hello, my name is Nick Fratto, and I'm the Special Education Supervisor and Special Projects Coordinator for the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. Welcome to this parent presentation on IEPs 101, Unlocking the Blueprint for Your Child's Education. Before we start the presentation, I would just like to let you know that the AIU's mission is to be an educational community that advocates and advances equitable opportunities for every learner. Our vision is that through equitable access, all learners achieve their full potential. What is an IEP, or Individualized Education Plan? It really is the blueprint for your child's education over the course of one calendar year. An IEP will list all of the special education services that your child should receive in order for them to benefit from a free and appropriate education, or FAPE. Although an IEP is written to outline the services over one calendar year, it can be reopened and revised at any time. A request to revise the IEP can come from the school or the parent. Anytime an annual IEP is held, there are certain members of the team that are required to participate. This includes the parent, a regular education teacher, unless your child attends a full-time special education placement, a special education teacher, and the LEA or local education administrator. This is typically the building principal, assistant principal, a special education administrator, or someone designated by the school to serve in this capacity. Other members of the team may include related services providers, such as speech pathologist, OT, PT, an advocate, or any individual that the parent would like to bring to the meeting that they feel can provide valuable information, and other individuals that can contribute to the plan. I cannot stress enough how important it is for the parents to be an active participant in the IEP meeting. IEP meetings should be scheduled at a mutually convenient time for both the parent and the district. Although in-person attendance at an IEP meeting is preferred, parents may choose to participate either by phone or video conference. Whenever a student is evaluated and qualifies for special education, IEPs must be completed within 30 calendar days after the evaluation team issues its evaluation report or reevaluation report. An IEP must be implemented within 10 school days after it's approved. By law, all IEPs must be reviewed annually without exception. Let's review the different parts of the IEP. The first part of the plan is the signature page. All participants are required to sign the IEP signature page. Signature denotes participation and not agreement. When invited to the IEP meeting, parents are always provided with a new copy of the procedural safeguards. If you do not receive a copy, parents are encouraged to ask for a copy at the IEP meeting. There is a place on the IEP where parents are asked to sign indicating that they have received their procedural safeguards. The first section of the IEP is called the Special Considerations. The IEP team must go through each consideration and document whether it applies to the student. These questions are: does the student exhibit behaviors that impede their learning or that of others? Is the student blind or visually impaired? Is the student deaf or hard of hearing? Does the student have communication needs? Does the student require assistive technology devices and/or services? Does the student have limited English proficiency? Anytime the team answers yes to any of these questions, it must be addressed in the IEP. The next section of the IEP is the present levels of educational performance. This section should address how the student is currently performing in academics, communication, social or emotional skills, behavior, functional or adaptive skills, or daily living skills, and other relevant areas. This section also specifically identifies a student's strengths and needs identified through assessments, teacher input, parent input, and observations. Finally, this section talks about how the student's disability impacts learning and participation in the general education curriculum. Our goal is always to have students follow the general education curriculum. However, there are some students that have extensive needs that require the use of an alternative educational curriculum. The next section of the IEP is the transition plan. Whenever students are 14 years of age or older, the team needs to begin talking about post-secondary goals, or what the student will be doing after graduation. This includes plans to attend college, vocational training programs, and preparation for a job. At age 14, the transition plans may be less specific. However, whenever the students approach the age of 18, plans should be very specific. The next section of the IEP addresses the student's participation on state and local assessments. In Pennsylvania, all students in grades 3 through 8 and 11th grade must take the PSSA or the PA system of school assessment. Those students that have significant cognitive impairment and are instructed using an alternative curriculum may qualify for the PASA, or Pennsylvania Alternative School Assessment. Students must meet specific criteria to qualify for the PASA. The core section of the IEP is the section that outlines your child's goals. Goals must be based on present levels of educational performance. If it was not addressed in the present levels of educational performance, then it should not be a goal. Goals should be connected to the student's needs. They should be specific. What exact skill behavior will be taught? They should be measurable. How will progress be tracked? Will it be tracked by percentage, frequency, or a rubric? They should be achievable. Should be reasonable for the student in 1 year. Goals should address both academic and functional skills. Finally, any student that qualifies for the PASA or the alternative assessment must have short-term objectives under each goal. The next section of the IEP are the modifications and specially designed instructions. Modifications and accommodations are changes to how your child learns or shows what they know. Specifically, accommodations are support that does not change the content or expectations. For example, extended time, preferential seating, and the use of a calculator are all considered accommodations. Modifications, on the other hand, are a change to what the student is expected to learn or demonstrate. For example, reducing the number of problems, providing alternate assignments, or giving simplified text are examples of modifications. To put it plainly, accommodations give access, modifications change the expectation. This section of the IEP must list the specific modifications or specially designed instruction, must include the location, frequency, and the projected beginning and ending date of the service. The next area that is addressed in the IEP is the related services section. These are the extra supports and therapies that a child may need in order to benefit from their special education program. Examples of related services include speech and language, occupational therapy for fine motor skills, physical therapy that addresses gross motor skills, transportation like specialized bus or van services or any accommodations for travel, counseling services such as school-based social emotional supports. Psychological services like assessments, consultation, and direct support. School health and nursing services, such as those services, medical support services that are needed during the school day. Social work services, linking families with resources, attendance, and behavioral supports. Audiology services, which is hearing support, auditory training, amplification device management. Orientation and mobility services, those are services for students with visual impairments. And interpreting services, such as sign language, cued speech, and oral interpreting services. This section of the IEP must also list the specific modifications or specially designed instruction, the location, frequency, and the projected beginning and ending date of the service. If necessary, any supports that school staff would need in order to help facilitate or implement the IEP should be listed under the supports for school personnel. This would include training, consultation, or any specific equipment that may be needed. This section of the IEP must also have the type of service, location, frequency, and the projected beginning and ending date of those services. The IEP team must consider whether or not your child is eligible for extended school year, or ESY. Although a student may regress during the summer, some students may struggle to keep skills they've already learned when school is on break. If they lose skills and have a very hard time getting them back once school resumes, ESY might be necessary. ESY is not the same as summer school, and it is not designed to take the place of child care, summer recreational programs, or respite programs. Students must meet specific criteria to qualify for ESY. There are certain factors which must be assessed to determine eligibility. These include regression, recoupment, mastery, self-sufficiency, independence, successive interruptions in a child's educational program, and severity of disability. If a student qualifies for ESY, the ESY program will be detailed in the IEP. After the team develops services and outlines them in the IEP, the team must determine what types of supports the student requires. These services depend upon the amount and type of special instruction or support your child needs. The team also discusses where those services should take place. In most cases, the services can be provided at the student's home school. However, there are situations in which a student may require very specialized services to address their behavioral, medical, or mental health or sensory needs. Types of services include autistic support, blind and visually impaired support, deaf or hearing impaired support, emotional support, learning support, life skills support, multiple disabilities support, physical support, and speech and language support. The last section of the IEP addresses the levels of support that the student requires. By law, schools are required to consider the least restrictive environment, or LRE. Levels of support include itinerant, for those students that receive special education for 20% or less of the school day; supplemental, for those students that receive special education for more than 20% but less than 80% of their school day; and full-time support for those students that spend more than 80% of their time outside of the regular education classroom. Once an IEP meeting is convened, a NORUP, or Notice of Recommended Educational Placement, document is presented to the parents for signature. The NORUP should list the recommendations of the team, include the type and location of services, and the levels of support. Parent signature is required on this document before the IEP can be implemented. As I stated earlier, parents are a vital member of the IEP team. Do not be afraid to speak up and ask questions if there is something you do not understand. If you do not feel that the IEP addresses your child's needs, do not sign the NORP and ask for a continuation of the IEP meeting. Try to obtain a draft copy of the IEP before the meeting so you have a chance to review the recommendations and can develop a list of questions for the meeting. If your primary language is not English, ask for the special education documents to be translated. Make sure that you always have the contact information for the staff that are providing the special education services so that you can contact them directly when you have questions. And finally, ask for tips regarding how you might be able to support your child at home. This concludes this presentation. However, if you have any questions, please do not be afraid to reach out to me. My phone and email address are listed on the slide. I hope you found this presentation to be helpful. Thank you for your time.